I'm gonna treat this video as more of a podcast kind of thing, no footage, no real editing, just talking about this movie. This is the kind of video that I would really love to make whenever I go out to the theater, so just let me know what you think down below. To start, I'll give a non-spoiler review, and then I'll warn you when the spoilers are gonna start to come. So last night I went out and saw Hereditary. I'm honestly still decompressing. I literally had trouble sleeping last night, and I think those are both great signs. One thing I think is important if you haven't seen any trailers for this movie, and you're even slightly interested in a very well executed, slightly traumatizing horror movie, just go out and see it. Don't look for any kind of plot synopsis, don't watch the trailers, just go for it. So much of this movie absolutely stunned me. It's a scary movie in 2018, and it doesn't rely on jump scares at all. Looking back, it's hard to find one of those classic occurrences of a bunch of random stuff just popping out at you with a loud noise. Entire scenes of eeriness, anxiety, and fear replace those 3-second long, cheap scares that you find in so many lesser horror movies. The sound design is incredible, the visuals are stunning, everything combines for a visceral experience that I can't remember having anywhere else. I really think this is the scariest movie I've ever seen, but equally important to that, it's just a great film. The story is well told, there's bits and pieces of information that you're fed throughout the film that pay off massively throughout. Pay attention to everything. Every small detail matters in one way or another. This is executed not only through the fantastic direction of Ari Aster, which by the way, this is his debut full-length film. It's not only executed through the wonderful screenplay written by Aster, it's also through some of the best acting of the year. I didn't see a bad performance all throughout Hereditary. That being said, there are certainly a few standouts. Toni Collette as the mother is unbelievable. From her body language to her dialogue, we see someone who's truly living in this terrible situation. There's a few scenes that she delivers that absolutely warrant some talk of award nominations. Adding on to that, there's also a few scenes with her that will be etched into my brain for weeks, and that brings me to another point. The sign of a truly great horror movie, for me at least, is one that I'm completely unsure of whether or not I want to see it again right away. There was this internal struggle for me as soon as I left the theater. Part of me wanted to buy another ticket because of how great the movie was. With everything I've talked about so far, this movie got me so incredibly invested. It's beautiful, everything is so well executed, but boy did it scare the hell out of me. Then part of me wanted this movie erased from my memory because honestly, it's pretty upsetting. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm walking a thin line, but this movie does things that your average big studio popcorn movie would never dream of doing. It takes risks, and they certainly left a mark on me. I feel like it's rare that a horror movie affects me in that way. I had a great time watching stuff like It and It Follows. I didn't mean for those to sound like one franchise, but whatever. But those movies didn't leave a mark on me at all. They were just kind of fun, and I enjoyed them. If I was really trying to pick scary movies out that made me a little shaken up, I guess The Conjuring, The Witch too, but they were out of my mind by the time I went to sleep the night I saw them. Hereditary really got to me. I got a little sidetracked there for a second, but I wanted to touch on some of the other performances. Alex Wolff as the son Peter is fantastic. He, as many people my age would know, was originally famous for starring in Nickelodeon's The Naked Brothers Band when he and his brother Nat were little kids. It's crazy seeing what he's blossomed into. Through his facial expressions alone, he can evoke such a specific feeling, and it doesn't feel contrived at all. Throughout this movie, you see him go through some very heavy things, and like I said about Toni Collette, he really seems to be living in this terrible world. He's had a few other decent roles recently, and I think this is going to be his breakout movie. Expect to see him in a ton of stuff in the near future. I'm going to wrap on the non-spoilers in just a second, so here to review. If you want to see this movie even a little tiny bit, know these things. This is extremely well made. Every shot is there for a reason, the direction is incredible, the acting is top notch, the screenplay gives you bits and pieces of what you need without ever revealing too much. This is not your run-of-the-mill horror movie. And by saying that, I want to reiterate a few things. One, I really doubt you're going to be able to guess what happens at every turn. The scares are long and drawn out. It doesn't follow the usual formula of walking down a creepy hallway for a minute, character slowly thinking about opening the door, the tension rises, the door opens, and then something pops out with a loud screech in the score, and then the character yells. That is not what happens in this movie. What I also mean by this not being your run-of-the-mill horror movie, this film takes risks on a variety of levels. From what I've seen so far, a lot of mainstream audiences are hating this movie. I saw Hereditary get a D+ on one of those sites where it's purely based on audience score, and while I think it's unfair to say that Hereditary is bad because technically I think it's pretty objectively well made, it's not surprising to me that a lot of people hate it. It's very upsetting, it's emotionally draining, anxiety-inducing, and it will tamper with your mind on a much deeper level than something dumb and fun like last year's Happy Death Day, which I enjoyed, by the way. If you have even the slightest interest in this movie or the horror genre, go out and see it. Don't watch any trailers, go grab a couple of friends, go by yourself, whatever, just go see it. This is now your spoiler warning. Everything from here on out will include spoilers. I'm mainly going to be giving some thoughts on different pieces of symbolism, foreshadowing, asking questions on things I'm confused about, and so on. Spoilers. Ready? Okay. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about. After the obituary type thing, the first shot is of Annie's miniatures. The camera is panning around the room and we zoom into one. That shot transitions, very well by the way, into the first quote-unquote real moment of the movie, which is Peter being woken up by Steve. At first when I saw this, I just thought it was a clever camera trick to begin the film. I don't know how many of you saw Game Night, which was brilliant by the way, but they did a lot of similar things. Just fun little camera tricks to get you more involved in the film. However, when Hereditary is ending, and I really hope all the non-spoiler people are gone by now, we see the weird cult doing the ceremony in the treehouse. The camera zooms out in a way that we see the treehouse almost as if it was cut in half or something, and it looks like one of Annie's miniatures, like we're peeking into the setting of King Payman's ceremony. This makes me question whether or not the entire movie happened. Is everything in the plot just stuff in Annie's mind and she's making miniatures of it all? If it's not just a clever camera trick and a callback to her creepy hobby, I think it leaves the door open for a few different scenarios. One being that life is normal and she just makes miniatures of some weird creepy stuff that's in her subconscious, or that she plans on doing in the future. 2, she seems to make miniatures reactively and not proactively throughout the movie. After Charlie's accident in the car, she makes a miniature about it. Therefore, everything in the plot could have been real and she's just making her usual reactive miniature about the weird stuff in her life, this time about King Payman's ceremony. This one's a little foggy because she cut her own head off, but if she's able to float up to the treehouse, then maybe she can make miniatures too. I just think that the shot of the treehouse ceremony looking like a miniature was certainly on purpose. I'm just not sure how to take it. The next thing is about 2 little nods to lips or mouths in the movie. At the very beginning, during the funeral/wake scene, we see, I think, Charlie walk up and wipe the grandmother's lips. It was either Charlie or one of the quote-unquote strange faces that showed up to the funeral, but later on when Annie is at Joan's house, she drinks some tea and a little piece of dark something comes out of her mouth. It looks like it either could have been dirt, a tea leaf, I don't know, but the camera focused on it long enough to make it seem important. I have no theories here, so I'd like to hear your thoughts. Here's a note about the motif and importance of beheadings in the film. In the book on King Payman that Annie finds in Grandma's stuff, it shows a picture of him riding a camel with 3 severed heads hanging down the side. Payman is said to have a deep knowledge of life itself, but also specifically the arts. In one way or another, all 3 generations of the family, Grandma, Annie, and Charlie, were not only decapitated, but they were also artists. So King Payman wanted 3 heads, and he was given 3 heads. You could almost say that it was a special gift of sorts too, because the 3 artists might be giving their knowledge and artistic skill to Payman through their heads. I don't know. And just another small thing, at the party that Peter went to, when he goes to smoke in the bedroom, the kids on the bed are watching a video of what looked to be a guillotine. And just for a second, I need to talk about how incredible the scene with Charlie's death is. While the buildup of kids vigorously chopping nuts at the party is a little bit on the nose, as soon as she starts to get the allergic reaction, everything gets so intense. The direction, the sound design, the cuts, everything works so well together to build this perfect, terribly upsetting scene. As soon as you hear the thud when Charlie's head is out the window, we as an audience aren't even really told what exactly happened. Peter stops cold and the look on his face is remarkable. It's this shock that I can't even put into words. And then there's a wide shot of the car slowly driving again once Peter starts to get a hold of himself. And we still don't know exactly what happened. He drives home, goes up the driveway, walks up to bed, and you don't see Charlie coming along with him. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I still had some hope for her. Maybe she just hit her head really hard and the weird cult powers can heal her. I don't know. But as an audience, we still don't know exactly what happened to her, and it's been a few minutes. Peter goes to bed, eyes wide open, and we hear Annie getting into the car in the background. She starts horrifically screaming, and at that point it's like, oh yeah, they really killed a kid. Even more shocking is when we cut directly to her head on the side of the road. One, I think it's phenomenal how they played that off. To keep everyone so in the dark about what happened for several minutes, and then just to show that image is unheard of. Then I was in shock for the next 20 or 30 minutes that Charlie wasn't coming back in her own body at least. I saw one trailer for Hereditary many months ago and didn't want to spoil anything, so I kept it out of my mind. But that whole time and through the beginning of the movie, I assumed Charlie would be the lead. It would be her movie about her doing some crazy supernatural stuff the entire time. But nope, this movie kept me guessing the whole time, and that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. Some of my favorite scenes were in Peter's high school. I'm a sucker for symbolism in the form of a character's favorite book, a lesson they were learning at school, etc. I know they can be a little too on the nose sometimes, but I really love them. Specifically at one point in the English class, the lesson was about a main character in a story not being able to change his own destiny. If I remember correctly, it's talked about in two ways, which mirror two sides of Hereditary perfectly. One concept is that the character didn't quite do enough to change the future, even though it was possible. This goes back to Annie's child rearing. There's that one scene when she's having a nightmare about her and Peter yelling at one another. She's telling him that she didn't want to have him, she tried having a miscarriage, and more. Annie knew that if she had kids, Grandma would eventually do some crazy stuff to them. And even though she tried to stop him from being born, and Steve put the no contact order in as well, Grandma still got her way in the end. There was also a side to one of the lessons at the high school to the characters not having a choice at all. This goes hand in hand with another thing I wanted to bring up about the miniatures. The entire Graham family, from one way of looking at it, never had a chance. Like the figurines in a miniature, and like the moral of the lesson in school, their fate was being controlled by an outer party the whole time, the cult. And then this is a microscopic thing, but at the very end of the movie, the screen goes black, the word Hereditary comes on the screen, and one red letter drops down and forms part of the first name in the credits. Get it? It's Hereditary. The letter got passed down from one word to the next. Alright, moving on. And so now to discuss the things dealing with possession. First off, Charlie. From what I can gather, it would make sense that Charlie had king payment in her from birth. It's said that she didn't even cry, even when she was born. This was most likely happening because Grandma was in the picture during this time, and she wasn't there when Peter was born. Hence the stuff about Grandma never letting go of Charlie when she was little, protecting her, and so on. But an allergy-ridden younger female isn't what King Payman wanted, so from a young age he's been inside of Charlie's body, doing whatever he can to break her down in order for him to get a new host. He could even be influencing her and tempting her to eat all those chocolates with nuts in order for her to go into shock, and so on. If you really want to reach, this could also partially explain the scene with her death. King Payman could be the one sticking her head out the window. Charlie also said early on that Grandma always wanted her to be a boy. In the book on King Payman, it says he prefers a male host, which he eventually gets. The thing that I'm a little bit more confused about is Annie's role in all of this. Would possession be the right word for her? From the very start of the movie, is she a completely normal person, or did Grandma influence her from the time she was a baby? It's said that Annie's brother committed suicide because Grandma kept trying to put people in him. So did Annie have the influence of the cult in her brain? I think that for most of the movie, she's pretty normal. She's obviously been going through a lot of trauma, which has led to some mental illnesses, but I think she's good-hearted. Deep down, there is some of Grandma in her, though, as the title of the film would lead me to believe. But as the trauma continues and she opens herself up to the spiritual world after being tricked by Joan, she has some Payman/Charlie in her at that point. From then on, we see her burn Steve and pretend to have this shocked look on her face, only to get a look of accomplishment once he has no shot of survival. Then once she's terrifying Peter by chasing him throughout the house and climbing up and down the walls, that's Payman doing his best to weaken Peter. It's probably easier for him to transfer into a new host once they're super vulnerable. This comes to a peak once all the cult members are in the attic, and Annie is sawing her head off and Peter jumps out the window. Now that Annie's body is useless and Peter's weak and terrified laying in the grass, it's easy enough for Payman to take his body on as the new host. So now for a few things that I may have glossed over a little bit. Who is it that dug up Grandma's body? I think it easily could have been Annie or the cult. The harder to explain would have been Annie because that's so early in the movie, and we don't really see any signs of possession yet. In the end, she's kind of an unreliable narrator in a way, though. She seems to have dissociative identity disorder, which could lead her to pretty much having multiple personalities, with one possibly being controlled by a cult mind state, digging up the body, and her normal personality not having any memory of it. The more simple answer is that Joan and the cult dug up the body, Grandma gave them a key to the house before she died, and that's how they got inside. Pretty easy. The blue light that we see throughout the movie seems to be King Payman's presence. If I remember correctly, we see it right before the pigeon flies into the window and before Peter has his crazy possession moment in the classroom. Joan's obviously some sort of higher up in the cult, probably the leader since the passing of Grandma. She was given that floor mat, she's the one that tempted Annie into opening herself up to the spirit world, and there's that camera outside of her apartment, which I'm guessing is used by the cult to monitor cult activities. I don't know. The story about Annie attempting to burn her kids alive with paint thinner and matches while she was sleepwalking seems to be a loving trait when you look back on it. Whether she was actually sleepwalking or not, some part of her conscious or subconscious was looking out for her children and trying to protect them. If she was able to kill them then and there, then maybe she could have foiled the plans of the cult. And at the conclusion of the film, from what I can gather, Charlie and King Payman are now one being, living in Peter's body without any sign of Peter's subconscious left. Joan congratulates and praises to both Charlie and Payman. That confused me a little bit because in the end, wasn't it all for Payman? I know that Charlie played an integral part of the plan, but it just seems a little odd that Payman's letting her take the spotlight too. Maybe neither of them have a choice though. I think that's all I have to talk about. If you have any symbolism you want to mention, any foreshadowing, questions, etc., please drop them down below. I really loved this movie, even if it kind of destroyed me, and I'd love to keep talking about it. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. Remember to like and subscribe if you want more videos like this. If you want to follow my social media, the links are down below. You can also donate to my Patreon, help the show, and get some cool rewards if you click the link on the screen. And I sell merch at tpublic.com/user/alfomedia. Thanks for watching, and always forward.